I have Phil Solange, who is a criminal attorney in Nassau and Suffolk County. And I also brought in Michelle Labayen. Did I pronounce that right?
You did, Stephanie.
All right, look at that. I never took French, but I did my best.
Close enough,
right?
You were good.
Okay. And Michelle is a bankruptcy attorney both in New York and New Jersey.
Correct.
So I'm going to throw this to you guys because you're the experts here. Adrian and I are just the gossip queens.
Right.
Okay. My experts, tell me, what is going on here in reality?
Well, at least in regards to the New Jersey Housewives, the issue with the bankruptcy issue became perhaps way too real, more real than what they were expecting. So you have the image of the reality show of this very luxurious life and cars and boats and all the beautiful household furnishings. And at the end, a lot of that, if not all of it, was all securitized, meaning that they didn't have any equity in any of the property. They had debt. They had debt in a tune of over $7 million that they claimed on their bankruptcy. Multiple properties, multiple commercial properties, all of it they ended up surrendering without an ability to maintain or hold any of it. So to portray this reality of having a very luxurious life, but yet at the same time really not owning any of it, and a smoke and mirrors more or less of what the true reality is, which led them into trouble because you can see them on TV having this very luxurious life, and then they tell the bankruptcy court they don't have any money, they're broke. The two don't mesh more or less, and the bankruptcy court is the last place you want to go in and not reveal all of your assets or all of your liabilities, and they got into trouble.
Well, lots of lying and lots of tax evasion there, too. Lots of lying as well. How many counts were there, Stephanie?
It's a 39
I'm going to
count.
leave that to the criminal
Hey,
fella right
thank
here.
you, Stephanie. First and foremost, I want to tell you it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. You have a wonderful show. And as you indicated, I'm a New York criminal defense lawyer. And Teresa and Joe Giudice or Giudice are facing a 39-count indictment. I had an opportunity to review the indictment. First and foremost, I want to indicate that I don't represent Teresa, nor do I represent Joe in the criminal case, nor do I have any personal knowledge of the facts and circumstances surrounding the criminal case. But the indictment is very serious. An indictment is a legal document that accuses an individual of a crime or crimes. It's, in essence, is an accusation, and we have to remember that in our country, a criminal defendant is innocent until proven guilty. However, these are very serious allegations. The allegations contained within the indictment state that the couple conspired to commit bank fraud. The couple conspired to commit mail fraud. That the couple conspired to commit wire fraud, that there was loan application fraud and bankruptcy fraud as well. In addition, the indictment alleges that Joe failed to file income tax as required by law approximately during the time periods of 2004 to 2008. And these are very, very serious allegations.
Well, let me ask you a question, because that's just one of the reality people who have gotten into some type of issue. Why do all these reality people seem to fall into these tax problems, these bankruptcy problems, these criminal problems? And I'm talking about here, 8 or 10 other reality stars.
Well, that's difficult to say. A lot of these people, perhaps this is new to them. They obtain some notoriety quickly. They fall into some money quickly. They get bad advice, and they fail to do what's necessary. They don't file their taxes, and they live this very affluent lifestyle, and sometimes they do the wrong things.
Yeah, exactly as Phil said. I mean, you're receiving a lot of money quickly, and the advice that you're getting is probably not the best that you're receiving at that time. And when you're receiving this income, you're not thinking about quarterly taxes. You're not thinking about paying off other certain debt that you have as you're going along. And you certainly need a financial manager and to have trusted counsel and advice in all areas of that you're going to be endeavoring, especially when you have this type of publicity.
Right. And I think that's another issue, publicity. Does that make these people, and I say people because it's all different agencies, look at you more closely than the average person?
Well, you say that, though. What comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Right, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Perfect.
these people were in trouble years and years ago doing things that were wrong, and nobody saw it until they got on TV and said, "Oh, I just happened to spend $30,000 on this furniture for my home,"
Right.
and pulled out tons of money, and it makes everyone go zero in on them.
Right. Exactly. You know, and I know with the bankruptcy court, I know that they don't take any kind of nonsense.
Right, and the bankruptcy court looks back in time. They could look back 3 years, 5 years, even 8 years.
They can.
Absolutely. So if you were not filing your taxes within the last 4 or 5 years, if you did transferences, if you have all these other type of legal issues and concerns with your money, your transference, your property, they're certainly going to take a very good and hard look at all of your property and assets, since you're going to the bankruptcy court asking them to forgive you of your debt. And that's exactly what they're asking for, not a repayment, but a forgiveness of all of their debt.
And if you forget items, let's say you do forget items, and I'm saying this in the broadest sense, I'm not saying one person in particular, but let's say someone does forget to put items in their bankruptcy petition. How forgiving is the bankruptcy court to that?
Well, the bankruptcy court allows you to amend your petitions at just about any point going forward in the bankruptcy. But the issues, if you leave out perhaps a couch or a chair or some bedding or some furniture, that's fair enough. They're not asking for detail to detail specific items. But if you're leaving out 3 or 4 businesses that you own or 3 or 4 properties that you own, the assumption is you didn't forget it, but that you purposely left it out, because who's going to forget that they have businesses?
And how serious, I'm going to turn to you now, Phil, how serious is it if you do purposely leave out these items?
It is very serious. You mentioned publicity before, and as a criminal defendant, you never want publicity in your case. You never want a high-profile case because the government, the prosecuting office, usually takes a stronger position. I expect that the U.S. Attorney's Office will take a very strong position in this case because these are high-profile people,
Right.
and the U.S. Attorney's Office wants to set up an example, a deterrence, to teach people not to engage in this type of conduct. So I think that the U.S. Attorney's Office will take a very strong position.
When they
And you would agree it's in other things too, such as the Jersey Shore people who probably were in many fights before they were on the Jersey Shore, but now they have video of all of it.
Right.
And they want to make sure that people aren't fighting out on the street, so they want to make an example of them.
Right, that's true.
Reality shows.
That's true. Well, look at Richard Hatch. How long did it take till he actually went to jail? I mean, he had all those tax issues, but nothing happened, and they kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it because he was a high-profile guy, and they weren't going to just let it go.
Absolutely.
You know, and I believe, what, did he get a couple of years maybe? Or, I don't remember, but, you know, he had his share of problems, you know? And
yeah, and also with the bankruptcy law, I mean, it was recently changed in 2005 under the new law, the Bankruptcy, Abuse Protection, and Consumer Protection Act. So the idea is that you're preventing abuse and you're protecting consumers. Mm-hmm. So the thought is that they'll give you the opportunity to be able to correct any errors. But if you're looking at potential mortgage fraud, if you're combining that with not filing your taxes, and if you're combining that with leaving out huge amount of assets, it's the perfect storm, the trifecta, that you're pulling in all of these big political issues, social issues right now that we're dealing with. And again, as Phil mentioned, you're going to make an example and make sure other people follow the rule.
Right.
So what type of prison term are you talking about? Let's say there is this perfect storm of, you know, the trifecta, as you said.
Well, it's tough to determine that. The case is still in its infancy. It's a brand new case. They were arraigned a few weeks back. But there are a lot of factors that have to go into consideration, whether or not one of the defendants are going to cooperate or point a finger against each other, whether one of the defendants is going to assume all responsibility and culpability for the actions. But to answer your question, in arriving at an appropriate sentence, a federal judge looks at a sentencing table and looks at a defendant's prior criminal history or lack thereof and compares it against an offense level. Each offense, each crime has a different level. And then it comes in a chart, and then the judge determines what's guideline range that defendant falls under. And at that point in time, the judge can select what sentence is appropriate. In this case, the guideline range, it's very difficult to determine, but I expect that it'll be somewhere in a very high potential prison time because so much money is involved. There's an allegation that so much money was either stolen or accumulated through fraud. So at this point in time, there's a likelihood that incarceration could be a possible sentence with respect to these defendants. But once again, it's too early to determine that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, though? Martha Stewart, who's probably one of the most famous celebrities that went to jail for tax evasion,
Right.
she was only brought up on 2 counts.
Yes.
Was it tax evasion? Yeah.
It was lying about stocks.
Oh yeah, that's right. Wasn't it something with the stock market with
Well, and
Martha
there was
Stewart?
It's true. There was a whole bunch of problems.
Yeah.
Well, each case is different, as I indicated, but the judge, the sentencing is a very important part of federal criminal law, and the judge is going to look at the defendant's criminal background, or lack thereof, if they've been engaged or been convicted of these type of offense previously. The judge is also going to consider their family life, their kids. All these things are known as mitigating circumstances, and the judge could give leniency towards that. One potential option is that one of the defendants may cooperate with the government against the other defendant. Cooperation is where a defendant works with the U.S. Attorney's Office to try to secure a conviction against another defendant. If the defendant substantially complies, the U.S. Attorney's Office can issue what's known as a 5K1 letter, and at that point in time, the federal judge can sentence the defendant to anything that he or she, the judge, feels is appropriate, including no incarceration.
Right.
Okay.
You know, they might take into the fact that she's got 4 kids. You know, they might.
Right.
Absolutely.
Sure, that's always a consideration.
All right. Well, we have to break to a commercial.